Da 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 da. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Developer Chat on Wednesday, August 13th, 2008. Today, our special guests are the Chaz and Helper Yoko, here to answer your questions and whatnot. To quote Rick Slick. I guess we should just start with anything that the Chaz might have to state about upcoming products and any questions that he might have to the developer community before we go to Q&A.
Thank you everyone for attending. I know there's other things going on, so I appreciate you spending the time here. I don't know how many of you had gotten to attend beta yesterday, but we had a couple things in there. One item that came up last time was the car parts and the whole try it, being able to see what's in auctions. So there's a few things that happen there. One, you'll be able to use the try it on the car part. Samson has been working hard on getting that resolved. So that was in the beta yesterday. Also, a few bonuses to that. When you go to the auction, you'll be able to see in the auction, when you go to sell a car, you'll be able to see the parts that are associated with that car. And also, if you click on the About tag of the car, you'll also be able to see all the parts on the car, making it easier to sell things. So I believe that addresses all the concerns about the whole part system. So I hope you're happy with how that turned out. Did any of you get to see that yesterday? Yeah, a few of you.
Yeah, you guys can feel free to speak up. We won't do any hands up just yet, but try not to speak over each other. I think that you guys know the drill. I saw the comments in the forums. They look good.
Another thing that we recently released is a few of the lights and the particle effects, the flames. So a few of those items. Right now they're kind of on the simple side. They're just a basic light. But as a few people were mentioning, that was a good thread on different ideas. The eventual goal is you'd be able to attach it to your developer items and maybe be able to select some of the parameters associated with the light in particle effects. So that's coming along. A lot of work behind the scenes has been going on with the whole interactivity thing. So although you're just starting to see some of the things with that, it's because we've kind of been building the framework rather than just introducing new items that are small steps. We're trying to make a larger leap by building a framework that we can use. And one of the items that's using that framework, that's using the interactivity, is the mannequins that were in beta. So this was one of the items that was asked for as far as 3D stores go. So if you didn't get to attend beta, basically this is a mannequin that you can dress with clothing, and then people can walk up to the item and purchase the clothing off of that item. The one that was in beta was kind of an early release, but you'll be able to sell developer clothing, and you'll get your auction for that item. And kind of related to developer, at least as far as the builder people go, a lot of work's been going on improving the reliability and speed of neighborhoods, and passes. So as we've gone along, we've been adding more stuff to passes and neighborhoods, and bigger items and things like that. And we've had, as we've been adding these new features, we finally got to the point where it wasn't just a couple people having issues with blinking zones where we could maybe remove some items or whatever, but it was becoming kind of a widespread problem. And we were able to actually fix some of the root causes of these problems. So we've fixed some of the various forms of blinking in flashing and whatever else Dan came up with. and also just the overall memory winking, yeah, overall memory usage. So also in beta yesterday was improving the speed at which your items appear in these neighborhoods.
Hello.
So that that kind of makes the life of a builder a little bit better as their items appear faster. Other than that, we haven't been doing much.
No, not very much at all. It sounds like you guys are, slacking off. I think those mannequins look freaking awesome, by the way. I totally want to build an army of mannequins and just send them out up against the armies of noobs.
Yeah, it's a little disturbing to see Allure giddy-upping mannequins, but other than that, they're pretty cool.
It's usually just pretty disturbing to see Allure.
So, any questions? I guess I'll open it up. Yeah, this
Yeah, what's the theory on the skin tone rather than the mud?
yeah, they'll have some options for additional skin tones and additional poses. The skin tone isn't going to be, they're not meant to look like actual avatars, but they'll have various skin tones that you can use. And also all the poses from, or most of the poses from StyleMaker.
I was actually fairly impressed when, I saw the thread saying, people asking for more skin tones, and not but 45 minutes later, I walked over to the Chaz's desk, and he already had, 3 mannequins with 3 different skin tones already able to set, and I was like, wow, that was quick.
I don't know. I'll have to discuss that, because we didn't want them to look too confusing because it is a virtual world, so if they look like an avatar, some people are going to confuse them as an avatar and wonder why they're not talking to them.
I can just picture it now, an avatar walking up to a mannequin. Hey, can I have your shirt? Can I have your shirt? Can I have your shirt? Please? Please? Can I have your shirt? Why aren't you talking to me? How rude. Nima asks, how are the handheld... I just lost that.
Handheld. Oops. Still on the top of the list. Obviously, interactivity is a big thing, and it's kind of a big thing for the company because it allows us to create a lot of different items. A lot of times we've been getting requests from partners to build certain things, and what we do is we end up building that one thing, and we don't get anything really other than the sale of that one thing. We don't kind of improve the overall product because it's such a one-off, if you will, which is kind of why we stopped and want to create an infrastructure for making it easier to create new items. But that is a bit of work. But aside from that, I don't really have any new to say on the props, but they still are on the top of the developer want list.
Davey Rocket asks, will the lighting effects require textures?
I'm not sure I understand that.
Probably means can you just have a lighting effect that's invisible and you can just drop an invisible light thing?
Isn't that what we just released? I don't know. I guess. I mean, if a developer also wants to create one, I don't know. Is there more to that question? Could that be clarified? Oh, the lights themselves are the light color is a parameter that is part of the light object itself. yeah, the light itself is not coming from a model or a texture. So it's kind of independent of any models or texture. So if you build something like the 12-seater fireside seating, there's a light object built into that. There's exactly a node that kind of says put it here, and there's also particle effects that go with that. That doesn't come from 3ds itself. You build your model in 3ds, but the lights and the particle effects are kind of separate. I don't have a timeline at this point. Yeah, I saw that that request that probably have different levels of lightings. Or the kind of the next thing would be parameters to light where you could set the brightness, set the color, maybe have some strobe effects or something like that. Yeah, the overall, yeah, the distance is kind of a fall off of the lights. I don't have any updates on the seating specs.
All right. Any other questions on lighting?
So there is, I did look into the larger objects, and the only thing that would kind of have to happen with larger objects is they would have to have a pretty limited collision. So if we're talking about like, a floor where they have a few collisions, that might work. If you want the poop on how it works, basically when you're standing next to something, so an avatar is standing in the world, basically it goes through and says, okay, my avatar, what is it standing next to? Okay, it's standing next to this building. And then it will say, am I close enough to this building? Am I a certain radius to that building? If I am, then it will go through each collision to say, am I standing or near a collision within that building? So if there happens to be a tree that's, far enough away from me, I'm not interacting with that tree. So and then that's basically happening for every avatar, every buggy, every dog, every bear ball. Every object in the world is sitting there going, am I near this thing? Am I near this thing? And then as it's finding what it's nearing, it's going through all the collisions to figure out the physics for it. The problem is when you have these big structures, and it's a radius, so even if you have this big flat plane, everything within the radius of that plane now has to check every collision every time. So that ends up being quite expensive rendering-wise. A good example is back in MTV when they were talking about keeping the collision budget down, because when you have a lot of objects, the collisions, of course, are the things that are going to make you lag, or feel that lag. They're one of the reasons. So they were one of the art houses was trying to keep the collision budget down. So they found that for trees, these trees along the side, rather than mesh, create a mesh that resembled those trees, they would kind of create these triangles, and they would go way up in the air to kind of get the size of the tree, and they were great because they used very few collisions, but they went way up in the air, and because they were big, that meant you were always colliding them. So you were standing there, your avatar was standing there colliding with every tree in the area, and that's one of the reasons why that area would end up seeming laggy. Or have a bad frame rate. So if we were to do larger specs, we would have to just keep the collision budget down. And globs are a little different. Globs and block libraries. Basically, when you see something like the tier tower, that's globs. I guess you're talking about. What that allows is you to have this block file that has like several models in it. So it might have a tree. It might have in the case of the tier tower, it has different sections of the tier tower, and then you have a glob that kind of puts it all together. So it uses the block libraries and puts it all together. It's a little more efficient because the model has several pieces, and each of the pieces will lot out independently. But the collision is the same thing. If you have big items that have huge collisions, you'll end up always colliding with them.
Sheets has a question. Since the dog was out at CC Metro, does that mean that painter dogs are coming?
Not on the immediate schedule. I don't know of anything.
Do we have any other questions, comments, Peanuts, Monsters?
Yeah, may I use voice? Is that alright?
Sure.
Go right ahead.
You were talking about the whole thing about we can't do 80 by 80s because of the collision limit. So what if we did 80 by 80 by 40s, 40 high, and have it so that they count as a four drops as when you put it out, but you can put out a single item and it counts as 4 drops. Just similar kind of like how the spades tables work.
We could. I think it's more, what I was saying is if we were to do some larger objects, we'd probably just have to make sure that, the amount of collisions in those objects was small. In other words, you wouldn't want to create very complicated objects. They're also very big because now everything's always colliding with them. So if we were to create, the types of things I could see with larger objects that people are trying to do is things like just creating a plane of grass or something like that, or just a floor where you don't want to have to use 20 decks just to get a floor, and then you only have room for 1 drop for your house. So as long as I guess we keep it like that, that sounds reasonable. I haven't seen if there's any issues other than that as far as large objects. I know they try to keep them pretty small. But it's, like I said, it's not really, we could make it 80 by 80 by 10, and it still ends up, because it's a radius, ends up a 80 drop, 80, radius, so you end up colliding it even if you're way up in the air.
Well, I guess the alternative is, if you do it nowadays using 40 by 40 objects, you're going to actually create an even worse case of lag.
Well, not really, because if you have, so if you have 180 meter object and it's the same complexity as 240, and say the 240 are next to each other, when you walk into 140, you're far enough away from the other one that you're no longer colliding with it. So it's not going through every single collision plane to see if, hey, am I colliding with this? Am I colliding with this? When you combine them into one object and that object is big, then you are, in fact, colliding with, every collision plane. So that's kind of how that works. I think there was a question about the mannequins. They're on their way. I don't have an exact date when they will be out. They're still under development.
Do you have a pricing ballpark?
I do not yet. It's still being worked on.
And then it's going to be limited to whatever outfits you assign to that when you submit it?
No, this will be something that you'll purchase in the shop, and then you'll be able to dress it. You'll be able to either enter PIDs, possibly auction IDs, to put the items on, or you can click on a tag. It basically says mirror, and it'll put on whatever items you're wearing.
All right, perfect. So they're reusable.
Right, you won't have to submit a mannequin. They're interactive.
Yeah, Voss is right. We're going to create an army of Agent Smiths.
Will we be able to turn on and off the lighting and particle effects in later releases?
Yeah, that's the goal, is you would have some sort of web page or something like that that you'd be able to specify different parameters on. Brightness, the fall off, the color, maybe some different effects or something like that. There isn't currently any Blender exporter in the works. There were some other exporters that I don't know what state they were in. Blender wasn't one of them, though. Anything else? Well, some of the things that we've done recently have improved the memory utilization of the zones. So, we're looking at, what are the things we could do as far as increasing the drops. So the drop itself is each PAS kind of is assigned a chunk of memory that it can use, based on all the objects in the world. The total amount of memory is kind of like divided up into these chunks and given to each object. And some of the things we've done have improved the memory usage. So we've talked about, could we increase the drops now that we've done that. Aside from that, another thing we've kind of talked about is, could we limit you based on like memory usage, so that way if you have a lot of small simple items, one or two textures, they don't take up as much as maybe a more complicated item. For example, you'd never get in a neighborhood 1,000 chairs in there. It just wouldn't work. You'd run out of memory before you ever got there. But if we said, for example, you could have, and I'm just throwing out a number, up to 100 drops in this zone, where your actual usage would be, if you have simple objects, you could have 100, or you could have 50 and 10 complicated objects or something like that. Those are some of the things that we're looking at. It's a good idea. Nothing's being worked on as far as that goes.
What about like 2 or 3 drop houses? I know it's pretty much an exploit to go and say, well, you can drop trick a 3-drop house, because then somebody could turn around and use that to drop outside of a PAS or lot. Is there any kind of way that we can have the ability to, rather than using a putback trick on that, like what Caesar was saying in the forums, like bacon or something, or paste or something, where you know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's still got to be stored somewhere, and you still end up, you can't really save the file. So I mean, if you have an object that has that we're kind of combining objects, I mean, that's really what a zone is doing. It's allowing you to take a zone, which is the one object, and stick all these other pieces in there. So you kind of have to store them somewhere.
Yeah, wild objects into one.
Yeah, see, the benefit of wielding, let's say, a 4-drop house into a single object that you can take out all at once and place anywhere in any zone, or sell in auctions as one piece. That way, because I know a lot of developers recently who have multiple drop items are selling like the first piece in auctions, and then the rest of the pieces aren't, being sold because people are getting confused, and then they demand refunds or rebates, and it gets very confusing. It'd be very beneficial to have something where we can combine multiple objects into one.
Yeah, I think some of the things with interactivity might end up helping with that. They still end up being 4 separate objects because, like I said, if you merge them so they're one object, the collisions now add up. So basically, when you're near that one object, you're going to be tested against all the collisions on that object. So there's reasons why you'd want to have them split. But I mean, with some of the things that interactivity is bringing, it is possible that we could have new abilities in the future. I just don't know what they are yet.
What about the point of raising the polygon limits on structures when we got 3,000 polygon limit boats but only 1,600 polygon limit structures?
Yeah, I mean that's a possibility. I think from a collision perspective, I don't know how much more you want to go, but that's a possibility.
That can stay. It's just the actual, LOD 0 specs.
Right.
Not too worried about the collision.
Yeah, I mean that's a possibility. If you want,
Did that run into vert limits?
Yeah, last question. That's going to be what,
yeah.
400? Is that going to be the 400?
Unless you split them up, you can split things up into multiple parts, and that helps with the vert limit. I think also it's the amount of verts on a texture. So there's a few ways you could get around that. I don't know, if you want, you can write up a few specs on what you'd like to see.
And the room feels silent as everyone try to gather their thoughts for another question. As
That's just because Merritt's not here.
He's probably out there enjoying some sort of their games.
How about terraforming?
There's nothing being done with that right now.
Davey, were you talking about creating new land, or as in terraforming, or terrain editor?
Terrain editor, where like whenever you drop a house, basically the ground would form around the house or whatever.
I recall mention of the terrain editor, but my understanding at the time, and I'm old so my memory's shot, but my understanding was that was going to be an internal tool that would allow there to more easily adjust the terrain if they needed to.
Right. Yeah, I don't believe you'd see anything as far as developer facing in at least the immediate future, as far as that goes. I know Becky was talking about the workshop zones. I know she knows she has some things to do, but I don't know where she is on that. I can poke her again.
Any other questions or comments? Feedback, maybe?
We're still going to talk about
Props?
Yeah, we still got that in the pipeline.
They're still in, yeah, we talked about those a little earlier. That's still on the top of the developer. I have a whole wiki on developer things that developers want, and that's currently on the top still.
Yeah, of course,
I'm still myself pushing for that because I think it would be very beneficial.
I just want a baseball bat every single time a lure comes near me.
So you can play baseball with her.
Exactly. I wouldn't hit her with it. I mean, that's just cruel. She doesn't know any better. I am so dead.
Any other questions?
I apologize for arriving late. Just one quick question. The 12-seater model, is that going to be available anytime soon for developers?
There was a whole list of seating specs that I got. Merritt had put it together, and a 12-seater was on the list. I don't have any date on when we do the seating specs.
What about multiple selections, say on a seating tag where you can have the choice to sit or stand?
We currently don't have anything like that where you can select the pose. Yeah, that would take a bit more work.
I would love that, so whenever I'm standing in a MAB meeting, I can set myself to grumpy, and I could just sit there with my arms crossed, looking all mean. For the last time, you can't have a MAB mug.
There are some additional clothing, including a male skin-tight thingy for Vash to wear his crazy comic outfits, I'm guessing. Not sure when those are going to be released. Probably have another phase of clothing at some point, but probably after the props.
It's called like a unitard, right? Like the full skin tight. And that what those are called in real life.
I believe that's what you're wearing.
Red and black with a big yellow V. Do we have any other questions or feedback or anything? Are you guys seriously so happy that you guys don't have that many questions? I know that, you know, you guys are actually really, really ecstatic at everything that we do. I mean, it shows in the forum posts.
What about land vehicles for us developers? Will we ever be able to design our own land vehicles?
Yeah, on that big list of developer things is builder ground vehicles. What's the delay on the seating specs? Is somebody work on them? If you want, you can put together a list of specs. I know Merritt had put together a list of structure specs last time, and I believe I created them pretty much identical to what he had asked for. So if you'd like to see a 3D and a 4C and a 4D, just come up with what you'd like to see.
We're always open for suggestions. Even from Allure. We apologize for the timing of this event. There were very few times that certain staff members can meet in the world at the same time, as it's obviously a very busy week for a lot of us, and so today was the best day and this was the best time for us to have this meeting. But we figured that with the recording that Chagall is making, thank you very much, Chagall, many people are going to be able to get a lot of these the information that we're feeding out for them to ask questions at the next developer chat, or even just ask questions in the forums.
You know, I was just thinking that over the last year or so, I've noticed a huge increase in the level of participation and communication from there to the developers. Probably more so than to the membership at large. And I've noticed the difference, and I appreciate it.
I think you cut off there at the end. I'm hoping that you said that you appreciate it.
Yes, I did. Sorry.
Yay! Well, the developers are a big part of our community, and we really appreciate all the things that you guys do, and keeping an open line of communication is, top of our list. So these meetings are for us as much as they are for you.
We knew you would see it our way sooner or later.
And just to address that, I mean, we do, it's not just the developers we do this with. We have somebody, that works primarily on, neighborhoods, and they're always interacting with, people in the world and visiting with them and things like that. So, it does happen in different areas as well.
It's funny that you mentioned town hall meetings, Dr. You guys should be expecting to hear something quite soon about a town hall meeting, as well as other widespread types of events that we are planning. Some maybe as early as next week. Also, the Member Advisory Board, which is just announced, our first meeting, which is our orientation meeting, will be next week. And then after that, I'm sure they'll be soliciting feedback through the forums. That's just my plug for the MAB. Go MAB!
Plus a RLG in Ohio. Go Gray.
Go Olive! Actually, the Yoko is here to answer any questions that anybody might have had on customer service, but I think that customer service has been doing pretty well recently. If anybody has any questions, comments. She's having technical difficulties though, so I don't know whether or not she can hear. So, she can type. Can you hear me? Can you speak?
Why don't we turn it over to her then?
Yeah, I don't think she has any announcements, but if anybody has any questions.
I have a question.
Gift membership options.
Not that I don't mind talking to Suzanne, but, that gets old.
Well, I'm sure that we could probably discuss that probably in a member advisory board meeting or something. I think that's a great suggestion. Any other questions, comments, feedback?
Yes, I have a question. With all the new designers coming in, and with so much stuff coming in, is 3 days really enough? I mean, it sounds like submissions is really overloaded. Maybe possibly adding another push day within the week, just to kind of take off the workload, I guess, for the submission team.
Yoko, are you still having technical difficulties? 3 days. Or 3 days or 3 times? Isn't it 3 times a week that we have pushes, or is it 2 times a week? I'm behind.
3 times.
See, I knew something.
There's still work going on to improve that, the amount of times we can push, or even pushing. One of the thoughts was, currently we push for Wednesday's activation, we'll push it Tuesday morning, and there's been talk on pushing it Tuesday evening, since we've shortened the time it takes to push from like most of the day to a couple hours. That would give an extra day of content to come into the world, and also shorten the time. One of the reasons we didn't want to increase the amount of times we were, oh, yeah, actually we fixed that. One of the reasons we didn't want to increase the amount of times where we were doing a push was because after an activation, it would take like hours for the service to kind of get back running. And so every Monday, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, it would take, a few hours for neighborhoods to get everything and for you to see everything. In the last release, we've improved that so, things appear a lot faster after morning restart, after the content activation. So that's one of the reasons we weren't doing it. So, that may be another reason to increase the amount of days we're pushing. There are a few things, so we're working to tackle them.
Push it. Push it good.
The goal is, of course, to do it every day or as quickly as we could.
What about the possibility of, rather than a workshop zone like a PAS, like a neighborhood lot? So say like, I'm designing something solely just for me on my hood. This way I can test it in my hood and know what adjustments I need to make. Is that a possibility?
I don't believe at this point there's any plans to make a hood version or a lot version of the workshop zone.
Or what about a hood where, rather than having, all these workshop zones for non-developers to use as a PAS, which they still do, why not say a 100-acre hood that we can have access to go and test stuff in a hood rather than, like I said, in a workshop zone. I mean, that's just a suggestion, by the way.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I don't have any comment on that. I can mention that to Becky.
Or pixel, as it were.
Pixel.
Do we have any more questions, comments, or feedback? Looks like Jose Madre has joined the conversation, also known as Joe Mama.
Hey Chaz, real quick, I noticed in the preview, I guess they've got the film strip type deal, or frame or something like that. I haven't played with that. Is that any other neat feature?
Say that again?
Yeah, in the preview, I think for the animation, I noticed there was something in there where a film strip mode, I guess, where you can start what frame and go through a frame.
Yeah. One of the animations where it's frame mode, yeah.
Well, I hadn't tried that yet. I didn't know if that was something new. I mean, I've just gone through and used animations, and just give it a film, a number of frames and strips, but I didn't know what that new feature was supposed to mimic.
Oh, do you mean where it gives you the start frame and the end frame versus having like in multiples
Right.
of 8 or something like that? Yeah, I believe you could have like 3 frames or whatever.
Ah, okay. But then is that expecting it all to just be in the linear?
I think it's if you want to have it like, doing a subset of the frames. Some of that was in there because of the cards. I know the cards actually are an animation. They have a deck of all possible card faces, and then they kind of like animate to the one that you're currently holding. So I'm not sure if there's any other uses for that.
Okay, that explains that then. Thanks.
Well, it only the client uses DDS files, so it'd have to be converted to DDS. So, we don't use the JPEG or the PNG. We use the converted DDS.
So it would have to be at the previewer level. When it gets submitted, it gets converted just the way you convert PNGs or JPEGs to DDS.
Yeah, you'd have to save off the frames if you're trying to use something that was in a GIF file. You'd have to save off the frames that were in it and then combine that into like a JPEG. Just because it's loaded as a texture and then kind of shifted around based on your animation, but it's not actually loading different graphics each time. Yeah, I mean that's eventually the goal, is to bring some of the interactivity pieces to developer items. I don't know yet how we're still trying to learn how we can use those different things, but they'll be coming along the way. Anything else for tonight?
If not, I think that it's time to wrap up for the evening. And
You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
And we're done. I just want to give a special thanks to the Chaz, Helper Yoko, and Chagall. Thank you, Chagall, for filming and posting. You are awesome, as always. Also, special thanks for Allure for being my punching bag for the evening. Ha! She'll get me later. And go Olive Team. You guys are kicking butt and taking names. Continue down that line, and we will rule the world. Or win their games. You are quite welcome. I'll see some of you guys in Ohio. Good night, everyone.